Dr. Amasagna hurried down the busy hallway of the Grand Crystal Hotel, holding her cleaning trolley. Her hair was tied in a loose bun. Her uniform was stained from hours of nonstop work. She hadn't slept well in days. Her brother's hospital bills were mounting, and each extra shift felt like an insurmountable challenge. She glanced at her checklist. Next up, the presidential suite, room 1503. Meanwhile, Cairo Adelea stepped out his luxury car and into the cool, marble-floored lobby of the same hotel. The young tech billionaire had flown in from Dubai for a high-stakes business deal. Investors were waiting. The future of his latest AI company hung in the balance, but he was in a bad mood. His private jet had been delayed. His assistant had mixed up his schedule. Now, his suite wasn't ready either. As he marched down the hallway, phone glued to his ear, fate intervened. Dora, lost in her task, didn't hear him coming. She turned the corner with her mop bucket just as Cairo stormed around the same bend. Crash! Dirty water splashed onto Cairo's designer shoes and the hem of his crisp white shirt. The phone slipped from his hand. For a moment, everything stopped. DRA gasped, her eyes wide with panic. "Oh no! Oh my God, sir! I'm so sorry." Cairo's sharp eyes narrowed. "Do you even know what you just done?" He growled. "I didn't see you." I replied, "Please forgive me." DRA stammered, trembling. The hotel staff turned to watch. Cairo's voice was low but deadly. "This suit costs more than your annual salary." Humiliation burned in Dara's chest. She lowered her head. "It was an accident, sir." Cairo didn't respond. He simply stepped past her, dripping and furious. Back in the suite, as he changed into clean clothes, he muttered under his breath, "This trip is cursed." Little did he know that the girl who had just ruined his day would soon turn his life upside down. DRA worked the rest of her shift with trembling hands and a lump in her throat. The staff whispers followed her everywhere. "You splashed water on Cairo. Adelia, are you crazy?" But she couldn't worry about the gossip. Her brother, was running out of medicine. She had to keep this job, no matter what. That evening, she was assigned to clean the upper floors again. Her supervisor handed her a room card. "Suite 1503, he said. "The guest has stepped out. Be quick and thorough." Dar nodded, took a deep breath, and rode the lift in silence. She still hadn't realized that it was the same suite as the one from the earlier incident. Inside, the room was large and modern, lit only by the fading sunset through the glass walls. Dar moved quietly, wiping surfaces and fluffing pillows. Her legs ached and her eyes burned. When she reached the master bedroom, her body gave up. Just a few minutes, she told herself. She sat on the edge of the enormous bed to rest for a moment. Her eyes closed. She never meant to fall asleep. Cairo returned late, irritated and exhausted. The business dinner had gone worse than expected. The investors had been distracted. His mood was even darker than before. He pushed open the door to his suite, loosened his tie, and froze. Someone was in his bed. Not a thief, not a fan. It was a hotel cleaner, fast asleep and curled up on his sheets. She was still gripping a feathered duster loosely in her hand. His eyes widened. Storming across the room, he shook her shoulder. He grabbed her shoulder and shook it. Dara was startled awake, her heart hammering against her ribs. "No, I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." "Please don't." Cairo's voice sliced through her panic. "What are you doing here? Are you insane?" Tears welled instantly in her eyes. "I was tired. I'm sorry. I didn't even realize. I didn't mean to fall asleep. Please don't fire me." He froze. Recognition clicked into place. It was her, the same girl from the hallway. The mop water, the chaos. His anger surged, but then faltered. There was something in her face. Not just fear, not just shame. Exhaustion. Real, soul-deep exhaustion. Still, pride held him rigid. "Get out," he said, his voice like ice. Dar scrambled to her feet, nearly tripping in her haste to flee. The door closed quietly behind her. Cairo stood there, unmoving, before slowly sitting on the edge of the bed she had just left. His jaw was tight and his fist was clenched. Who was this girl? And why was she getting under his skin? Dar's heart pounded as she hurried down the hallway. By the time she reached the staff quarters, her legs felt like jelly. She didn't even notice the curious looks from the other workers. In the locker room, she slumped onto a bench and buried her face in her hands. Her fingers still smelled of the hotel's lemon-scented polish. Her cheeks burned with shame. How could she have fallen asleep in a guest bed? Not just any guest. Cairo Adela, billionaire, tech genius, and VIP at the hotel. She was sure she would be fired. Moments later, her supervisor stormed in, waving a clipboard. Dara, what have you done? I didn't mean to. You fell asleep in his bed. Do you know how lucky you are that he didn't call the police? I swear it was an accident. I don't want to hear any excuses. He said you're never to clean his apartment again. Dar nodded quickly, her voice soft. Yes, ma'am. The supervisor sighed. He didn't fire you. Count yourself lucky, but don't mess up again. Understood, Dara whispered. That night, she didn't go home straight away. Instead, she went to a nearby public hospital where her little brother, say, lay pale and weak, asleep. She gently brushed a curl from his forehead. Her own fears were pushed aside by the sound of his shallow breathing. Back at the hotel, Cairo stood by the window of his suite, looking out at the city lights. The skyline sparkled like glass. He had tried to forget her, that strange, quiet girl who had ruined his day and then slept in his bed as if it were her own. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Who works so hard that they pass out? What kind of life does someone like that live? He opened his tablet and stared at a financial report, but the numbers no longer made sense. Cairo closed it and leaned back. There's something about her, he muttered. It was something he didn't understand, and he didn't want to feel it. Not yet. The next morning, DRA arrived early for her shift, her eyes heavy from another sleepless night. She braced herself for more whispers and shame. But, to her surprise, the hotel staff were unusually quiet around her. There was no teasing or giggling. In fact, they avoided her altogether. It wasn't until she reached the back kitchen that her supervisor approached her again, this time looking puzzled. You've been specially requested. Dara blinked. What? Room service. Room 1503. Mr. Adelia asked for you by name. She froze. Why would he? The supervisor shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine. Just deliver the tray, then come right back and behave. Minutes later, Dar stood outside the door to the suite that had been haunting her dreams. She took a deep breath and knocked. Cairo opened the door himself. His shirt sleeves were rolled up and his hair was slightly tousled. He looked less like a billionaire and more like someone who hadn't slept either. Come in, he said simply. Dar stepped in quietly, keeping her eyes on the floor. She placed a tray on the glass table, her hands trembling. I'm sorry again, she said softly. Cairo didn't answer at first. Instead, he poured a cup of coffee, then said, You didn't get fired. No, sir. You're lucky. Yes, sir. There was silence until he spoke again. What's your name? She hesitated. Darasana. He looked at her for a long moment. Do you always work this hard? Dara's eyes darted up in confusion. Yes, sir. I don't have much of a choice. Cairo nodded slowly. That much is clear. He picked up a small envelope from the table and handed it to her. For you, he hesitated. Sir, I can't take it. He interrupted. It's just a tip. She opened it after she left the room. 100,000 naira, more than her monthly salary. She stared at the money, her heart pounding. Why was he doing this? What did he want in return? Later, in the locker room, the envelope lay beside her, unopened. The money could help. It could pay for C's medicine, a week's worth of groceries, and maybe even a little more. But her pride whispered warnings. Nothing comes for free, not from people like him. Still, she finally made up her mind. She would keep the money, but she would earn it. She would work harder than ever before. Back at the hotel, the whispers had grown louder. Staff spoke in hushed tones when she passed. Some were curious, others sneered. What does he see in her? One waitress muttered, She's just a cleaner. Someone else said, but Dar ignored them all. Later that afternoon, She was called again. Room 1503, her supervisor said, her eyes sharp. He asked for you again, he said. Dara's heart thudded, but she nodded and walked towards a lift. This time, Cairo greeted her at the door with a cup of tea. "You're not scared of me anymore?" he asked, half smiling. "I'm still trying to understand you," she replied honestly. He motioned towards a window. "Sit," he said. Dara hesitated, then perched lightly on the edge of the chair. "Tell me something," Cairo said. "If you weren't cleaning hotel rooms, what would you be doing?" Dara blinked. No one had ever asked her that before. "I wanted to study nursing and help people," she said, "but life got in the way." Cairo nodded, saying nothing. She shifted. "Why are you being kind to me?" He turned towards her, his voice calm but serious. "I don't know. Maybe I just noticed you." Silence hung between them. Then, just as suddenly, he stood up. "You can go," he said. Dara rose, confused. "Okay, thank you, sir." As she reached the door, he said quietly, "Next time, call me Cairo." "Next time, call me Cairo." She paused, nodded once, and stepped into the hallway. Behind her, the door clicked shut. DRA exhaled, her heart racing. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew that something had shifted. A name, a window seat, and the tiniest crack in a billionaire's armor. DRA returned home that night with a loaf of bread in one hand, and the envelope still hidden in her pocket. Her younger brother, sat up weakly on the mattress, his eyes lighting up. "You bought the good kind," he said, grinning despite the cough that followed. She smiled, ruffled his hair, and said, "Today was strange." He chewed slowly. "Strange good or strange bad? I don't know yet." She didn't mention the billionaire. She didn't talk about the whispers. She just said that someone had tipped her more than she expected. Her brother didn't press her for more information. Dar looked around her small, cluttered room with its peeling walls, cracked window and bucket, catching water from a leak. But tonight, they had bread and hope. Back at the Grand Crystal Hotel, Cairo stood by the balcony of his suite. His untouched dinner sat on the table. The city lights flickered like stars falling from the sky. His assistant had called earlier. "Should I book your return to Dubai, sir?" Cairo paused. "No. Extend the suite indefinitely. Just do it." He didn't know what he was doing anymore. This wasn't like him. He didn't get attached. He didn't linger. But there was something about Diarra. Her quiet dignity and the fire hidden beneath her exhaustion haunted him. The next day, Diarra was called again. Same room, same tray. This time, when she knocked, the door opened to reveal music playing softly from a speaker inside. Cairo was sitting near the window, reading something on his tablet. "You're early," he said, not looking up. "I try not to be late," Dar replied, setting the tray down. He looked up, then pointed to a chair. "Just sit for a minute." She hesitated, but something in his tone made her obey. They sat in silence for a while. No business talk. No orders, just quiet. Finally, he asked, "What do you do when you're not working?" "What do you do when you're not working?" "Try to survive," she replied. Cairo leaned back. "You're honest. I have no reason not to be." He smiled faintly, then picked up a second cup and poured her some tea. Without a word, he placed it in front of her. Dar stared at it. No one had ever poured her tea before. She sipped slowly, and for the first time, the silence between them didn't feel awkward. It felt safe. Later that day, Dar walked through the staff hallway, still feeling the warmth of the tea in her chest. She didn't know what Cairo was doing or why he kept asking for her, but deep down, part of her didn't want it to stop. At her locker, she found a folded note stuck between the cleaning gloves. "Meet me by the fountain after your shift." Her hands trembled when she found it. Her first instinct was to tear it up and throw it away, to forget it ever existed. But she didn't. That night, after her shift ended, she found herself standing by the hotel's garden fountain. Moonlight danced softly across the rippling water. Cairo was already there, waiting. He wasn't wearing a tie and was dressed in a plain gray jumper and jeans. "You came," he said, his voice low. "I don't know why," Dar replied, standing a few steps away. He looked at her carefully. "Do you trust me?" No, she answered. But I don't think you're pretending either. Cairo nodded slightly, his expression unreadable. I wanted to see where you live. She blinked. Why? Because I don't want to guess anymore. Silence. Then DRA said, I don't bring people there. I'm not people. That's the problem. They stood in that quiet tension for a while. Cairo stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not trying to fix you or change you. I just want to understand you. DRA looked away. Her voice cracked slightly. Most people like you don't even try. I'm not most people. She met his gaze for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then, softly, she said, Fine, tomorrow. After my shift. He smiled. Not an arrogant smile, but one filled with something softer. Thank you. As DRA walked home that night, her thoughts were in turmoil. What was she doing? This man lived in skyscrapers. She lived behind broken fences. He spoke in billions. She counted coins. Yet there was something about the way he looked at her that made her feel like she wasn't invisible. For once, she didn't want to disappear. The next day, Dora didn't eat. Her stomach turned too much to hold anything down. After her shift, she put on her plainest dress, combed her hair, and put on the least worn of her sandals. When she stepped outside, Cairo was already in the hotel car park, leaning against a sleek black SUV. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just a button-down shirt and trousers. He wasn't wearing a watch and didn't have an air of power. He smiled gently when he saw her. Ready? Dara hesitated, then nodded. The drive was quiet. She noticed that he didn't speak until she did. This is the longest journey I've ever taken with a stranger, she said finally. Maybe we're not strangers anymore. DRA glanced at him. His voice was soft, but there was weight behind it. They reached her neighborhood just after sunset. The streetlights flickered as though they were too tired to glow. Children played in the dusty road, their laughter cutting to the hum of generators. Cairo stepped out without hesitation. You don't have to, DRA began. I want to. They walked slowly towards her building. The street narrowed. A few neighbors peered through their windows. This is home, she said in a low voice. They reached her door. It was a rusted sheet of metal with a bent handle. Cairo stood quietly while she unlocked it. Inside, her brother looked up from his blanket, his eyes wide. Dara, who's that? Dara knelt beside him. A friend. Cairo nodded and waved. Hi, I'm Cairo. His eyes lit up like the tech guy from TV. Cairo laughed. Maybe they wouldn't stay long. Cairo didn't push. He just stood near the window and watched how carefully Dara tucked in seine, how she tidied their tiny room as if it mattered more than gold. On the way back, neither of them spoke. But as Cairo drove, he glanced at her and said, Thank you for showing me your world. Dara looked out the window. It's not much, she said. It's real. That's more than I can say for mine. That night, Dara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, her world had been revealed, and she wasn't sure how to feel about it. The days passed in soft, silent shifts. Cairo still called for Dar, sometimes just for tea and sometimes for no particular reason. They spoke in fragments, questions and glances, no declarations, no promises. And yet, something grew in the space between them. At work, Dara kept her head down. Whispers still followed her. Some were envious and some were cruel. I heard she'd moved into his room. She's just lucky, that's all. She'll fall soon. They always do. DRA didn't respond. Not with words, at least. Instead, she worked harder, cleaned better, and smiled less. She wanted no favors. She needed no saving. Meanwhile, Cairo found himself distracted during meetings and restless during calls. His mind wandered at inopportune moments. And every time Dar knocked on his door, he felt something unfamiliar settle over him. Not excitement, not desire. He told himself it wasn't serious, just a passing thing. But he was lying and he knew it. Then came the necklace. He had seen it while shopping for his mother. A thin silver chain, simple and elegant, just like Dar, and he bought it without thinking. But days passed. and he didn't give it to her until one evening. He placed it in a small box beneath her folded laundry in the hotel service room. There was no note and no signature. When DRA found it, her breath caught. She opened the box slowly, her heart pounding, the object inside shimmering in the light. Quiet and beautiful. She didn't need a note. She didn't need to ask. She already knew who had left it there. That night, she wore it beneath her uniform. No one saw it except him. The next morning, when DRA brought breakfast to the suite, he noticed a chain peeking from beneath her collar. Neither of them mentioned it, but they shared a quiet, steady look that said everything they couldn't. Still, they didn't touch. They didn't speak of love either. But both knew they were standing on the brink of something deep and dangerous. Neither of them wanted to take a step back. 3 weeks passed. Cairo Adelea was still the polished billionaire, with a sharp mind and a cold heart. But inside room 1503, something had changed. Every knock from DRA, every cup of tea they shared, chipped away at the walls he'd spent years building. And every time he really looked at her, he saw someone who had never asked for his money, his name, or his world. Only his honesty. Then came the storm. It arrived in heels. His mother, Mrs. Adana Della, flew into Lagos without warning. Tall, graceful, and fierce, she entered the hotel lobby accompanied by 2 assistants, carrying a designer bag, and with a gaze sharp enough to slice steel. She didn't need a room. She wanted answers. Cole was in a business meeting when she barged into room 1503. The staff scrambled and the receptionist whispered, but no one stopped her. She surveyed the elegant, expensive suite, which felt familiar, until she spotted the food tray with 2 cups, the faint floral scent and a strand of unfamiliar hair on the couch pillow. She frowned. Was there a woman? Cairo didn't answer. She didn't ask. Not yet, at least. But her eyes narrowed. From that moment on, she began to watch. Days later, standing near the lobby balcony, she saw it. Cairo, her son and the untouchable heir to the Adelea fortune, paused. Not to answer a call or make a deal, but to smile. To a hotel cleaner. A girl in a sky blue uniform with quiet eyes, holding a food tray. That was all she needed. Later that evening, Dar received a note. This time it wasn't from Cairo. It was folded neatly and had the hotel's letterhead on it. You are invited to a private tea. Suite 1104 for 30 p.m., Mrs. A. The Adelea DRA stared at it, her heart sinking. She didn't tell anyone, not even Cairo. When the time came, she changed into her cleanest uniform, brushed her hair, and walked to the door, feeling as though her legs were made of air. Mrs. Adelea opened the suite herself. She smiled, but her eyes did not. Dara, isn't it? Dara nodded. Come, let's have a talk. The suite smelled of perfume in the distance. On the table sat a teapot, untouched. Mrs. Adelea motioned for DRA to sit down. I hear you made quite the impression on my son. DRA lowered her gaze. I mean to. Let me be clear. The woman interrupted, her voice both sweet and sharp. This ends now. DRA's breath caught. You are not his equal. You are a cleaner. Don't mistake kindness for permanence. She poured the tea slowly, as though it were poison. You should leave while you still have your dignity. Then she reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a white envelope. This is enough money to start a new life somewhere far from here, far from him. Dara looked at the envelope, then back at the woman. She stood up slowly. I came here to work, she said quietly, not to beg and not to be bought. She left the envelope on the table untouched and, without saying another word, walked out. But inside, something had cracked. The next day, everything changed. Cairo woke early and got dressed before sunrise. He sat by the window, pretending to read, listening for footsteps in the hallway, and waiting for the knock he had come to expect. But it never came. By 10 a.m., the silence had become deafening. He picked up the phone and called the kitchen. Where's DRA? There was a pause, just long enough to mean something. Then a quiet voice. Sir, she didn't report for duty today. Cairo's chest tightened. Check again. But deep down, he already knew that something was wrong. He called her supervisor. The answer was the same. She had handed in her badge the previous night, left quietly and taken her brother with her. No forwarding address. Cairo stood frozen to the spot, the phone line still active in his hand. She was gone just like that. Cairo tore through the suite like a man chasing a ghost. He saw the empty teacups, the folded laundry, and a tiny forgotten button near the door. He could still smell her scent. Faint jasmine lingered. He called her number. Switched off. He checked with the staff. They knew nothing. There were no notes or messages. Later that night, Cairo sat alone in the dark, staring out of the window. The city lights sparkled beyond the glass. They were bright and busy, but meaningless without her. Then his phone rang. It was his mother. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. The silence in his voice spoke volumes. "I hope you've come to your senses," she said gently. But there was steel beneath her words. He didn't answer, so she continued. "A man like you doesn't build a life with a girl like that. She was never meant to stay. She was just a passing phase, Cairo. Not your future." His chest tightened. Had she done this? Had she driven Dar away? "What did you say to her?" he asked. "I reminded her the truth." "No, you humiliated her. I protected you." "I didn't need protecting." Her voice sharpened. "She's just a cleaner. Have you forgotten who you are, Cairo?" She was more real than anyone I've ever met. The line went silent. Then her final words came, cold and sure. "You'll thank me later." He ended the call without another word, not because he was finished with her, but because she would never understand. That night, he went to Dar's neighborhood, walked to the rusted door and knocked. A neighbor stepped out. "They left late last night. No goodbye." "Where did they go?" The woman shook her head. She didn't say. She just carried a small bag and a sleeping child. Cairo stood there for a long time while the moon watched him. He had lost deals, sleeping friends before, but never like this. This loss felt personal. It was as if a door had shut inside his chest. The worst part was that he didn't know if she would ever come back. Cairo stopped attending meetings. He skipped a board presentation for the first time in his career. His team didn't understand. Investors were confused. His assistant was panicking. But Cairo had one focus now, finding Dr. A. He hired a private investigator, paid for digital surveillance, and checked hospitals, clinics, and community shelters. Nothing. She had vanished like smoke. Each night, he returned to the suite that was still booked and untouched. He refused to leave. The room reminded him of her. The teacups, the chair by the window, and the echo of her soft footsteps. One afternoon, he sat on the hotel rooftop with his closest confidant, Toby. She left without a word. Cairo muttered, rubbing his temples. "Are you sure it wasn't fear?" Toby asked. "Maybe she thought she didn't belong." "She belonged more than anyone ever did." "Then why didn't you tell her?" Cairo said nothing. Toby leaned forward. "If she didn't leave a message, it means she was protecting herself, not rejecting you." Cairo looked out at the skyline, his voice low. "I thought I had time. Love doesn't wait. Cairo, not forever." That night, Cairo drove back to her old street again. The rusted door was still locked. A child's toy lay forgotten in the dirt. She sat on the broken step for hours with her phone in her hand, hoping and praying for a message. None came. But the next morning, a small envelope arrived at the front desk. There was no return address, just his name written in familiar handwriting. He opened it slowly. Inside was a note. "You gave me hope when I had none. But I need to find my own strength before I can stand beside you. D." Cairo stared at it, her heart hammering. She was alive. She was still out there. Though she had walked away, she hadn't closed the door completely. Now it was his turn to fight. Not for a deal or an empire, but for the girl who made his silence feel like peace. Months later, the world had moved on. Business boomed again. Cairo's face was back on magazine covers. Forbes called him the relentless visionary. But none of that mattered. The note from DRA remained folded in his wallet. He read it every night like a prayer. Then, one Saturday morning, while attending a small community tech outreach event in a small town, something caught Cairo's eye. Not a person, but a notice board. Pinned to it was a slightly crumpled school flyer. clearly printed. It advertised evening literacy classes for girls, led by volunteers at St. Grace Primary School. Beneath that, in small handwritten script, it said, "Taught by Miss Dara Amasagna." He froze. "Dara," he turned to a young teacher nearby and pointed at the flyer. "Do you know who this is?" The woman smiled warmly. "Oh, Miss Dar. She's wonderful. She used to work here part-time as a cleaner. Then she started helping some of the girls with their homework after school." Cairo's chest tightened. The teacher continued. "Now she teaches literacy classes 3 times a week. She doesn't get paid much, but she's dedicated. She says that no girl should grow up without learning how to read, like she almost did." Cairo leaned forward. "Is she here now?" "She comes in the evenings." The teacher said, "She always wears a small silver necklace. You'll know her when you see her." Cairo stepped back, stunned. She hadn't disappeared. She hadn't run away. She had stayed and grown. The sun was setting when Cairo returned to the school. He waited quietly near the gate, his heart beating fast. Children laughed in the background. A chalkboard squeaked. The air smelled of dust and hope. Then he saw her standing by the classroom door. She held a book in one hand and rested her other hand gently on a little girl's shoulder. She was smiling softly and kindly. She looked tired, yet peaceful. When the last child left, she turned to close the door and saw him. Her whole body froze. "Cairo." He stepped forward slowly. "Hi, Dar." She blinked, confused. "How did you find me?" He smiled slightly. "You taught me something. To look past what's fancy. I just followed the light." DRA looked down and shook her head. "You shouldn't be here. I had to see you." She crossed her arms, trying to appear strong. "You're a billionaire. I'm just a cleaner who used to clean your hotel room." He stepped closer. "So, we're clearly not from the same world. Cairo, your mother made that clear. She was wrong. She's powerful. She won't accept someone like me. I don't need her permission," he said quietly. Dar turned her face away. "You don't understand. I don't belong in your life. I don't wear designer dresses. I don't attend important meetings. I can't sit at your table." He looked at her for a long moment, then gently pointed at the silver necklace around her neck. "You said you didn't care, that I meant nothing to you, but you're still wearing it." Dara touched the necklace slowly, her fingers trembling. "I told myself to throw it away," she whispered. "So many times, but I couldn't because even when I left, I still loved you." Cairo's voice broke. "And I never stopped loving you." They stood in silence, the sky turning gold behind them. Finally, Dar stepped forward, her eyes wet and her voice quiet. "So what now?" He reached out and took her hand gently. "Now," Cairo said, "we write our own story. No mothers, no titles, just us." They didn't rush back to the city. For a few weeks, Cairo and Dar stayed in the quiet town. There were no cameras, no headlines, and no whispers behind their backs. Just peace. In that quiet, Cairo discovered things he had never had time for before. He walked barefoot down dusty roads with Dar chasing butterflies beside him. He helped Dar wash dishes by hand and laughed when he dropped a plate. He ate simple homemade meals of rice and beans, fried plantains, and swore they tasted better than anything his private chef had ever made. He slept in a small room with a wobbly ceiling fan and woke to the sound of birdsong, not business calls. For the first time in a long time, Dar didn't feel like she had to shrink herself. She let him see the parts of her that she used to hide. The fear, the strength, and the dreams that were too big to say out loud. He shared his vulnerabilities too. He talked about the pressure of always having to be perfect, his fear of failing in front of the world, and how lonely wealth could make you feel. At night, they sat outside under the stars, the sound of crickets filling the air. They didn't talk about boardrooms or backgrounds. They talked about who they were and who they were becoming. Slowly, without pressure, their love deepened, not as a billionaire and a former cleaner, but as two people who had experienced different kinds of heartbreak and were learning to heal together. A month later, the Grand Crystal Hotel was abuzz again, this time with camera flashes rather than gossip. Reporters lined the front entrance. Guests craned their necks. The staff whispered excitedly. This time, The billionaire wasn't arriving alone. Cairo Adilla stepped out of a black SUV, wearing a classic, sharp, tailored navy suit. Beside him walked Dee in a simple pale blue dress and flats, wearing that same silver necklace. She didn't cling to him. She didn't smile for the cameras. She simply walked beside him, calm and steady. The next day's headlines read, Cairo Adilla's surprise. The woman who changed the billionaire's life. She isn't who you'd expect. They didn't care. They had nothing to prove. Inside the hotel, the staff stood frozen to the spot. Some bowed, others looked away. Dar's former supervisor fumbled with her clipboard. Cairo greeted everyone politely, then turned to Dar. Ready? She nodded. They were there for a charity event. The gala had won. Cairo had insisted it be held in support of community education programs that Dar had helped design. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted results. He gave her both. Later that night, as the ballroom lights dimmed and the applause rose for the final speech, Cairo stepped onto the stage. He didn't talk about profits. He didn't talk about technology. Instead, he simply said, I met someone who reminded me that kindness doesn't wear a suit. Strength doesn't come from money. And that love often arrives when you least expect it. The crowd fell silent. Then slowly it stood. Standing near the back, Dar didn't cry. She simply watched him, steady, proud, and calm, with the same quiet determination that had once guided her through the hardest of days. After the gala, they walked outside, hand in hand. There were no guards and no noise. Just two people who had found each other in the unlikeliest of ways. I still think it's funny, Dar said with a smile. How did all this start? With me falling asleep in your bed? Cairo chuckled. Best accident of my life. And as the city lights blinked behind them, they stepped into the night, not as a billionaire and a cleaner, but as equals, as a home. The end. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to my channel to see more captivating stories like this one.